welcome to Recipes for Liberation, where we are creating and archiving a cookbook for the culture, preserving ancestral recipes while cultivating new ones. I am your host, Dr. Amar Jean, or AJ Escuffrey.
And I am your host, Micaiah Green, aka Kaya G.
So, um, every month around the new moon, we are going to both look at the past month and where we have been at the culture and the future month where we are going as the culture. We have our very special guest today, Dr. Nicole Rawls, who is a astrologer, anthropologist, storyteller, and all-around baddie who's here to help us set intentions for this current new moon. Welcome, Dr. Nicole.
Thank you. Welcome, y'all.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Yes, let's get into it.
We
Let's
have
get into it.
Let's get into it. We have been talking about the past month, which follows the new moon in Gemini last month, that a lot of astrologers kind of said was like a kind of neutral new moon. It's a new moon in Gemini, but Uranus was there.
Yeah.
And it does seem like we are seeing just lots of chatter, lots of discourse, lots of complicated conversations happening in community about a whole range of things in the culture. So we wanted to get your quick hot takes on what we've been talking about. And we believe that you might have been following some of these dust-ups with AI and some of our cultural luminaries, like obviously Aaliyah and the AI tribute at Essence,
hmm
and
Yeah.
Duran Bernard kind of popping on threads to talk about Black excellence, but using AI to talk about Black excellence. What are your thoughts on like these AI and the culture things? How should we be approaching or thinking about this?
So I actually quote tweeted Durand right on Threads. And here's my thing. I think the conversation actually went left where I was trying to take it right. We can talk about use of AI and people do a moral high ground around using AI because of the way it's going to take from the elements and the land and stuff like that. But my thing is, baby, if you ain't given no offerings to this land that you will live upon, if you've not gone to some fresh waters and given devotion to that, if you have not gone outside and asked yourself, can you breathe the air? Then the way that we use these kind of trending morality kind of things becomes nothing more than a way to deflect from our responsibility. My issue with what Duran was doing is that, baby, this is not a new conversation. We need to stop. We need to stop conflating this idea of using a Google search versus a large language model. You're letting somebody do the thinking for you versus actually doing the research, asking some questions, making a conversation, and then giving an analysis. So my thing is, if you're going to work a culture, being a cultural worker, and I say this all respect to Duran, then actually be the motherfucking cultural worker and use your intellect and your experiences to give us something new. Don't ask somebody else to do the thinking for you. Give it a name, therefore an avatar, giving it an energy, and then having that somehow be you then saying you are getting knowledge out. You're not, baby. You are being the vessel for an AI machine that is actually making us more stupid. So that was my issue with that. Not the
Mm.
AI itself. We can talk about that, but the way that we don't want to think for ourselves.
Okay. And let's get into this, right? Because I have seen so much discourse around thinking for yourself versus, putting questions into AI versus like doing your own research. And I feel like in the case of Duran, it started with an inquiry, right?
Mhm.
It sounded like he was like, I want to do some critical thinking around the connection between Black excellence and white supremacy because I don't understand. I kind of don't know where to start. So I'm just going to hit up Chat GPT, to pump out a primer for me, right? Can we get into like what do you think is a proper workflow, right? If you have an inquiry, you don't necessarily have a lot of time, you're interested in critical thinking, where should one start? What are the steps before you open up Chat GPT?
I think it's asking what's the question you're trying to ask, and what is what kind of answer would you need in order to ask the question, right? And that's going to give you the direction of where you would go to search for the answer, right? Here's the other thing, and this is where I do believe because of Duran's age, he's part of the Pluto and Sag generation. This is a Pluto and Sag generation being immature in their Sagittarianness, because here's the thing. You must go out and experience life, but instead of experiencing it and then using that experience, turn it into wisdom, you want to jump to being a teacher, right? So that was also my other thing. Be curious, be the student, right? The opposite of Sag, Gemini. Be the student so that you can actually learn how to become a teacher. A lot of young folks want to jump to teaching some shit that you barely got the 100 lesson level in. So I had no problem with Duran's question, but it's a long-standing question, baby. Just because it's new to you does not mean it's new to the lexicon. So I think that's where the curiosity too is. If it's a new idea, ask yourself, is this new or is it new to me? If it's new to me, then baby, then I need to take responsibility for going down the journey and figuring out then how do I collect this information to again to answer the question. So I think it's a both thing. Like that's how I would answer that for especially for the Sag folks.
Yeah. There's a lot of I know a lot of Sages in my life, rising sun, and it's strong Sag placements who they want to be right before they want to get into the mess of learning, right? And like
Yes.
Gemini is the back and forth, the mess of learning. It's this but that, and this person said this, and this person said that, and like let's not try to reconcile and come up with the
Yes.
answer first. Let's actually like be in the exploration of it all. And actually, in there, you realize it gets you more curious because you realize things are complicated, right?
Yeah.
And people came up to the answer, but they wrestled with it for a long time. And actually, when they came up with the answer, then someone immediately was like, "But that's not the answer, right?" And that is culture, right? We can have morals and values and want things to be a certain way, but actually, they're not going to be that certain way unless you take people on the journey of learning, right? That's how people come to their morals and
Yes.
values. Um,
100%. And also, I mean, I would love to give Duran his props, right? Because I think, like many of us, he used threads as kind of
Mhm.
like a stream of consciousness. Hey, y'all, this is what I did. I'm sure there was no expectation of getting
Yeah.
called in and called out in the way that that transpired. And I will say, I really appreciated the acknowledgement and the listening posture, that he
Mhm.
eventually arrived to around people saying, hey, here's why this is ruffling some feathers. Here's why we're taking issue with this. I didn't necessarily agree with like the character assassination that
No.
started to transpire. I'm like, what we're not gonna do is disrespect like
Yeah.
him as an artist and him as someone who is contributing so expansively to our culture right now, just because he popped a question into Chat GPT.
I no,
And
I
so
completely agree with that. I do
yeah.
agree with that. And this is actually funny enough, the journey of a Sag, you have to learn through experience. You know what I'm saying? So like a part of me is like, no, this was going to happen in some way, shape, or form with Duran. The only thing I would say as someone who's older and as a strategist, I just really hope that he allows himself the ability to grow as well and realize that he does have a bigger profile. So the way in which you engage with the public must also shift a bit because there is a way that the public is not your friend, baby. The public is a location that can easily consume you. So I want him to be free and I want him to explore. That is definitely Pluto and Sag energy, and I want him
Mhm.
protected. That's the big thing. I
Absolutely.
want him protected.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's also a beautiful segue. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this astrological moment that we find ourselves in and how it relates to the death of celebrity culture and
Yeah.
just the decline, the decay of celebrity culture that we are experiencing right now. And like, is it related to what's going on in the planets? Like, where do you think we're at on the spectrum?
I think this goes into the kind of astrology of July that's been building for a while with all the outer planets changing signs fully this year, completely. So we have this, what this Barbalt's basket that's happening. And really what this is the outer planets along with Jupiter are all going to be in this kind of configuration and we're going to be at 4 degrees, right? So this is a foundation, forest foundation, stability. In the tarot, it's the emperor. What is the emperor? The emperor is the strategist. The emperor is ruled by Aries, which is a Mars ruled sign. So I think what we're having to do right now is we're having to re-strategize what it means for us to collectively be together via looking at the ways we understand our sense of self and how that sense of self has been dictated by ideologies that no longer make sense. So this is Pluto and Aquarius having a conversation with Neptune and Aries, having that conversation with Gemini, Uranus and Gemini. But then what we happen, here comes Jupiter coming in, being the teacher. We give Jupiter, I think we mischaracterize Jupiter and Saturn, and that's actually really important right now as part of this whole conversation. If we see Saturn and Jupiter as the grandparents of the zodiac, but Saturn is the crone and Jupiter as the father, the great father, right? That are trying to have us understand the relationship between spirit and ideology and concepts, and how that then influences the structures and systems of society, right? There's a conversation happening here. What we're seeing with this idea of the death of celebrity culture is we're seeing the death of the patriarch. And so you have to understand celebrity culture and patriarchy as a mirror of one another. Celebrity culture is another articulation of patriarchy. Because what is patriarchy? It's not just about a man, y'all. Patriarchy is this understanding, right, that there is a top-down leadership. There is a strict hierarchy. There is somebody that must be in control. We call it the father. But we see patriarchy operating through people who don't have penises, right? And it can actually operate better through them because a patriarch must be conditioned and groomed by a matriarch, right? So what we're seeing here, I think, with the kind of celebrity culture is this beginning of the South Node going into Leo, the North Node going to Aquarius, but Jupiter also being in Leo right now, entering in, opposing Pluto. What we're having to see is that people have given up their light to other folks and authority outside themselves, whether it be a celebrity, whether it be a pope, whether it be a president, whether it be a theory, right? We have been taught to give ourselves up, the authority figure. But that's not been working because everything is changing, everything is breaking. It's these outer planets. So celebrity culture is being shifted because we're realizing that we've been conned. And that con means you got to look at yourself. That is going to be the lesson of Jupiter. If you let the patriarch go, South Node in Leo, a decline of leadership, decline of this idea of the charismatic leader, the one you look to. But at the other end, Jupiter's saying, then what's the lesson? What's left when you kill that patriarch? Well, shit, you're light, your inner child. So we're seeing the wave of creativity coming out. You can't build new worlds until you can create some shit. So what we're seeing is we're letting celebrity culture go because we're not looking to somebody else to tell us what to look like, how to dress, what am I supposed to like and not like, what is political and not political. Do you see what I'm saying? Because we're understanding intellect differently. Uranus and Gemini, the new moon in Gemini actually was powerful to me because of Uranus being there. It's asking us to think differently. And then Mars happened right after. So now we're being asked to have different strategies, right? Different ways of concepts, different kind of understandings of who we are. And so for me, this is a beautiful time to figure out where your sun is. That's Leo. Where is your kid, right? Where do you want to, and who do you want to play with? Right. So that's what's going to allow us to kill the collective because it's not just celebrity culture dying, it's the collective dying too. Because the collective ushered in and allowed and gave their power up to those celebrities. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a conversation happening. You got to take responsibility. It's the mirror turned round, Gemini, the trickster at the crossroads, right? Baby, you can't just look to somebody else. You got to look to yourself. So it's a big reflective moment. July is a big reflective moment collectively. If you want to build new worlds, there's a responsibility, and that's what Saturn is saying in Aries. It's not in detriment. She is saying it's time to queer some shit. It is time to bend the realities of how we understood relationship and justice and love and money, because the shit is abusive. So if you don't want to be abused no more, then own your own head, Aries. So then going back to 4, the Emperor, which is Aries, which is the idea of what are you defending and why? And what happens if you defended your inner kid, defended your light, and let that shine? So that's what I think celebrity culture is dying.
Woo, that was a
You
whole
preaching.
word.
I was
That
just
was a
writing
whole-
about
That
this.
was
So
a
it's all
word. That was a word.
I mean, this is a very complicated astrological setup, and I've heard a lot of
Yeah.
astrologers say a lot of things about it, but I do feel like you really tied it into the personal because a lot of it is generational and it's like a
Yeah.
big culture shift that we're going through right now. But I think you're right that the culture shift is about how we tap into our individuality and our own sovereignty, the
Yeah.
individuality being that Aries, that Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, that restructuring around the dream of who we are and can
Yeah.
be, that spark of life, and the Jupiter and Leo, the stepping into our own power. And then those air signs are quite social, right? So there's a way that we
Yep.
have to work this out socially as well. And the social changes in the way technology is changing is like forcing us to reflect on who we are. And so I like that you're saying this is a reflective moment because a lot of astrologers have been saying fire, air, it's creative, do something, act. And I think that can be good if you've been reflecting. But if you haven't
Yes.
reflected and you act, you're going to probably burn yourself, right? With
Yeah.
fire and air right now
Yeah.
Yes.
to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that because when you look at the basket, right, and you just take it and you only see the, the major planets along with the nodes in like Lilith. But there's one sign that has nothing in it, Scorpio. That's what we have to look to as the prescription. So, what is Scorpio? The other side of Mars, the other strategist. We're being asked to butcher shit, to take responsibility to get to the depths of something. Scorpio is the butcher. It's the researcher. It's the one that will pick a bone to the marrow. I'm a Scorpio rising, right? We will pick a bone to the marrow. So, we're being asked to get into the depths of shit right now to figure out then what are the new strategies that we have to deploy. And it's not just going to be a fight, it's going to have to be through an understanding of a knowing that we then start to believe. You see what I mean? So like what you're saying, AJ, is spot on to what I was looking at it today, this morning. Like, no, we have to, you can't build something unless you get into your own shit. So Scorpio is saying, come into your own depths and look at your shadow.
1000%. I'm so happy we're having this conversation. I think, we've been talking a lot about this notion of accountability and how this word keeps popping up in these like collective pop cultural moments. And as I was reflecting on like what is accountability, I kept coming back to self accountability. Like
Hmm.
that has to be the root of
Yeah.
everything that we're talking about because it really does start within ourselves. It starts with our ability to be honest with ourselves. Only can then we look at our neighbor, at our partner, at our, community member, or our community leaders and actually be able to come to them with something that we want to hold them accountable for.
Yes. I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's where these kind of words come in. This is the power, I believe, of Uranus and Gemini right now. Right. And I tell people all the time, like, some clients, like, you have to be careful of the mental processes and like the anxiety and stuff. But actually, instead of running away from it and think something is wrong, I need you to work with that emotion. I need you to ask yourself, what is that emotion saying? Now, this is going to tie into the new moon in Cancer we'll talk about in a minute. But Uranus and Gemini is what is really opening up that conversation, right, with you, with yourself. And I think the accountability piece, it's so easy to ask others to be accountable because then again, we are taught to give our authority up to someone else. It's another articulation of the patriarchy. We all digest it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so got to be accountable, self accountability. Baby, you don't even know my full government name. How the hell you going to have me accountable to something? You don't
Right.
know me, right? We don't know you. So we're also this idea of community. You can't have accountability really the way that people are trying to throw and weaponize it out there until you have a community. But people don't have community. You have fans, right?
Right.
You have
Right.
people who you want to say yes to you, but then you don't know how to show up for because you can't show up for yourself. And I don't say that in
Ooh.
some negative way. I say that because we're not taught to show up for ourselves because we're not taught to actually believe our bodies. So this is also an embodiment moment. We have all this fire and air, but Chiron's going to remind us we got a goddamn body because it's in Taurus right now, right? For a little bit, it's going to jump back into Aries. Say, what's the lesson you learn about having your identity? Because remember, your identity is Aries. It's the protection for the body because Taurus is the body, right? Along with the moon, but it's the physical body. So how do you protect this physical body? What the identity is put upon. But who's putting identities upon you? And does that
Mhm.
shit actually allow you to breathe? Can your skin breathe?
Yeah, that Chiron and Taurus is going to be squaring that Jupiter Pluto opposition from Leo to Aquarius, which is Leo, the light you shine, Aquarius, the collective that where your light has to kind of fade in with that, right? And then Chiron's in the middle of that, been like, okay, but you got to eat, you got to sleep. Like, how are you nourishing yourself? Like,
Do you see what
Oh,
I'm saying?
do we have food? I mean, there's going to be a lot of real embodied issues, and we're going to have to work out who we are through all of that.
Exactly. And so we're
mm,
gonna get it's gonna get real human real quick. I call July the awakening of the human. Now, when I
mm,
say that, people want to go, and this is where you got to understand, y'all. I'm not talking no whitewash bullshit. The awakening of the human, right, is where the sacred the sacred is now the mundane. We are realizing the impact of Neptune and Pisces for so long. We are in realizing the impact of delusions, that when we didn't have our feet, we allowed ourselves to float with other people's kind of ideas and concepts and telling us to manifest outside and, think above and beyond and, embed the secret and mindfulness. Well, what has that gotten us? Docility. It's gotten us, you might know the concepts, you might know the words, accountability, colonization, intersectionality. Oh, no, you don't. You use these words, right? You use these words, right? And without having the grounding in it. So I think when we're the awakening of the human that we're going to come into July, it's going to remind us that the foundations of being human is care. And that's what the new moon in Cancer is going to have us illuminating. Right?
Well, let's get into it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Micaiah, you go.
I was just gonna say I'm like excited and terrified for that because I have noticed, unfortunately, that sometimes it feels like it can take really extreme circumstances for folks to return to care and to
Yes.
return to compassion and community. And when I think about our history in this country as Black folks, so much of our solidarity was born out of our oppression. You know what I'm saying? And I think
Yes.
once we, started getting access to money and started getting, integrated into society and people got excited about proximity to white folks and just started prioritizing comfort over community. I don't know. It makes me, I'm like, on one end, I'm excited that we're going to start getting back to it, but I'm also nervous about what it's going to take, I think, collectively for us to really return to these core values. But I know it's in our best interest.
No, but I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point, right? Because you said something really important there that Chiron is going to be introducing us, but next year, for the next 7 years, it'll be really central. Were you ever really comfortable? Or was that also the illusion?
Right.
So how do you define comfort and security and safety when everything we were told would give us those things has been literally removed from us? The structures that were supposed to be so solid disintegrated when Saturn was in Pisces. Mm-hmm. Right. So the lie, the delusion, I think, is that you weren't comfortable. So the only way you can find comfort is figuring out then who you are and who your community is. So I completely agree with you, right? And I think this is the flip with Uranus and Gemini, hitting that Pluto, hitting that Neptune. It's the stories we tell that lay the foundations for the concepts that then create the collectives and structures that we say we want to live in. So this is also the rise of new myths. We have to tell new stories. We have to resurrect old gods in new ways. So this is the fall of the patriarch that I keep talking about, because what you're talking about really is patriarchy. Patriarchy says you can be more comfortable doing what? Going in your own house, controlling your own family unit, right? Making it a hierarchy so that you make sure that you got your foot on somebody else's neck. Right. Yeah. So I think that's what we're getting. So I completely agree with you. And I think it will hurt. But the thing is, we already are in pain. So I think we're going to actually finally feel for the first time and have to acknowledge the feeling, not just drink it, smoke it, or eat it away because the goddamn food is going to kill us. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what.
Yeah, so we're gonna feel it. I feel like is maybe a good place to start with this Cancer new moon. We do have Mercury retrograde completely in Cancer all of July as well. It's a kind of extra long Mercury retrograde. And, Micaiah and I were just talking about Jupiter in Cancer. And so this is coming right after Jupiter leaves Cancer. And hopefully this last year, you've found some way to figure out where you haven't been caring for yourself, where care has been misaligned in your life in some way. Care for yourself, care for others. And this maybe new moon Mercury retrograde is helping us integrate some of that. I mean, what do you think people should be thinking about as they think about this next lunar cycle?
So the one thing I would say is the biggest question I keep coming back to with this new moon cycle, because it's going to be conjunct Mercury retrograde, who will say your name when you're dead?
Ooh.
That's the question I keep asking folks. It's about lineage. This is about lineage. It's about family structures. Do the family structures that we are in really support us? So then this is about mothering and motherhood. What does it mean to mother without being of sacrifice, right? What
Mm.
does it mean? I say that because then Mercury, what does Mercury rule? Virgo and Gemini. What's over in Virgo? South Node. We have to release the ways that we have been taught service and servitude, the ways that Virgo has been subsumed into this some kind of virginal maiden that is nothing more than serving a patriarch. So if we let that go and let your stomach lead, let your actual you digest and you shit out that understanding, and then you got Uranus over here in Gemini along with Mars, so new strategies. Well, this new moon in Cancer is asking us to reflect, because Mercury is here, about whether the family you have is actually caring. And if not, do you take the responsibility to create new family structures? Because this is new world building. In order to create new worlds, right, we have to go to the foundations of what is of society. Foundations of society is the family. And that's the first thing that the colonial project took and remade and restructured and kept cutting down more and more, because that cut down what you were saying earlier, community, right? It cuts. So then this is where the structures come in. You've got redlining, you've got eminent domain, you've got actual highways cutting through the communities and the kind of housing systems that allowed multi-generational people to live, right? We are told you're 18, get your ass out. But what sense does that make when at 18 you took your first nodal return? So the new moon in Cancer is asking us to reflect upon then, what does it mean to allow yourself to feel? And those feelings come to the surface. Cancer is the shore, because Jupiter for the last year has been expanding and showing us, teaching us the lesson that we have absolutely no care in society. We are not cared for. And if we believe our feelings, because you believe your stomach, finally, and what you can and cannot digest, then this new moon is saying, giving us an invitation to kickstart this basket of new change making by saying the first thing you got to figure out is then who is your family, and then what is mothering and motherhood. If you're killing a patriarch, then you got to kill the matriarch that constructed that patriarch, right? So that we can
Ooh.
open up, because the mothers are here,
Wow, wow, wow,
right?
wow, wow.
And this is what Ifa said too. So Ifa for this thing that came down in July or June for the school for the year. The Odu is the first Odu which is Ejiogbe. And Ejiogbe literally said it's a new beginning and that the mothers are here. And I've been saying that for a year, because that is what, if you see Saturn as the crone moving into Aries with Neptune, the mothers are here saying it's time to take responsibility for the thing called life and creation. So again, who will say your name when you're dead is the question that I ask folks for this new moon in Cancer. And that's going to open up a lot of shit.
Ooh,
It's
child.
already opening up a lot in me. I mean, I have a follow-up question for both of you. I mean, this has been a huge, huge, huge theme in my life over the past
Mm.
year with, my supreme matriarch. My grandmother passed away a few days before
Mm.
Christmas, and it's already reshaping my entire family, which was kind of already underway, but I've been sitting a lot with this energy of understanding that, like, the mothering practices that I grew up under are not sustainable.
Yes.
It exhausts them. It stresses everybody out. No one is benefiting from this. Actually, no, some people are, but I say all of that to say it's not sustainable and it's not something that I feel compelled to replicate. And so my question for you both is, like, how are y'all redefining what family means in your own life? Like, how are you composting these structures and, like, creating new worlds in your own, like, intimate communities?
Ooh,
Mm.
child. Yeah. I mean,
I love that.
this weekend for around the new moon and the Kanzimi, I will actually be at my very first family reunion on my mother's side,
Oh,
which is
look at
very much,
that.
Wow.
yeah, it's very literal. It's, very much inspired by my mother's mother, my grandmother, who was kind of like a second mother to me. And I took a new last name this past year with Jupiter and Cancer, her last
Mm.
name that she had wanted to take when she moved here to the US from Jamaica. And she learned from her grandmother, who had a Venus Jupiter conjunction in Cancer, that grandmothers were supposed to do this kind of immense amount of care. And she really sacrificed so much to raise me and my brother and my cousins. I mean, she never remarried. She worked incredible hours both for her kids and us. She picked us up from school every day. She made us breakfast and dinner. I mean, now that I have friends who have children and I see how their parents support or don't support. I'm like, she went above and beyond and really kind of sacrificed a lot of what she wanted, I think, in this life for us. And I do think I internalized that a little bit. My Cancer rising, and I think actually my ascendant is
Mhm.
probably pretty close to her Pluto in Cancer.
Mm.
Um, that I've learned to kind of overserve and overgive as a way of building family and receiving love and feeling like I'm not worthy of love unless I'm providing. And
Ooh.
this
Hmm.
year has been a lot of people kind of hitting me up for things. I mean, my inbox, my text
Mhm.
messages, every day someone wants something. And I have learned that if I just continue to give selflessly without asking for at least a little recognition on the, not for
Mhm.
what I'm giving back, but just a little bit of care and consideration the other way, I will burn out, right? And so it has been a year of tapping into the opposite of that Cancer, that Capricorn, that what are those
There you
boundaries, what
go.
are the structures that support me being able to care for you? And that is certainly the intention I'm bringing into the new year and just kind of saying no more and just kind of drawing more like, I will answer this text in the morning. I'm sorry if you're crashing out. You're going to have to care for yourself because I'm tired, like,
Yes.
um, that is, I think, something that some of us who've been overgiving need to maybe start to really interrogate where we get that from and what our notion of family is. Because if we're
Right.
unwell, we're useless to society, right?
Yeah.
Now, some others of us have not been giving enough, and that's the other
Facts.
thing too.
Facts.
Some others of us are like not in our sovereignty or not able to care for ourselves, and so we're out here just using everybody. So
Yep.
it's going
Ooh.
to be a balance,
Ooh.
right? I'm sure.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Say that again for the folks in the back.
Yes. I love that. I love how literal astrology can be, though. Like you just basically trace the genealogy of your mother's line. And that's something else that I wanted to say about this new moon. It's about genealogy, right? And who stories do you know of your bloodlines? And what stories do you know? Who are the names that you know? And if it's women, do you know anything about them? Or do you only thing you know is what they've done for other people? Right. That's a really
Ooh.
big, because I think a lot of the mothers and the aunties and all of the women in these our lines, and even the queer folks who are feminine, right, who take on those mothering roles, many times we don't know who they are. We don't even know what color they
Yeah.
liked, what food they like, but you do know how they made you feel. So I'm
Yep.
like, so AJ, I love what you're saying. Like, no, I know how I make you feel, but how do you make me feel? Especially being the Leo sun with the Cancer, that's a luminaries. You got to get it back because all you know how to do is give it out, right? It's a dance you got to play. And it's funny you say names too, because I actually changed my last name back to what I was originally born with, which is Rawls, which is my mother's line, right? I'm one of eight, and my parents had seven of us, and my father had a child before who was much older, and they're all Truesdale. But funny enough, I'm the only child that was born. I'm born a bastard. My parents got married a month after I was born. So that everybody else has Truesdale, and I always had Rouse, my birth certificate. I didn't know till I was 17, though, that I was aroused when I applied to college and I did the FAFSA. And they said, baby, you don't exist. And I said, what do you mean? Then I'm in the kitchen, and my dad looked at my mom, and my dad was like, Rosie, did you change Nikki's name? And she was like, Truesdale, you know what? I might have forgotten. I'm looking at like, what are y'all even talking about? Right. So my
Mhm.
last name is Rouse. The whole point of telling that story is last year, funny enough, when you said you changed your name, AJ, like there's a what last year it's been on my mind for a few years. Spirit's been really answered really loud. And last year I realized I need to go to the line that claimed me at birth, and it was my mother's line, not my father's. Right. If it's eight kids by the same person and you're the only one that is not claimed, there's a reason for that. And so for me, this Cancerian and thinking about family, it's been really loud for me for a year since Jupiter really went into Cancer, of reclaiming not only my name, but then what does that mean to be a Rouse when I come from a line? Then the Rouse are barbers, are farmers, and are musicians, right? They
Mhm.
own juke joints. They call down spirit in different ways. So I think for me, it's learning how to mother as a single mom who's raising a child with my ex, but raising a queer kid with my ex. So I'm learning how to mother through a queer lens, which is very different. I had to shed a lot of the servitude, a lot of the performance, a lot of trying to always make sure my kid is not bored. I'm tired.
Mhm.
Like we can play differently. And in doing that, it actually has allowed them to shine a lot more as a queer trans kid in 2026, right? They take up space in a way that I didn't know how to until I was in my 40s, and they're 11. So I think
Wow.
that's for me making a family, and I live in a queer house, right? Like all of my friends, like Z was over at my friend Moya's last night. She calls Moya bestie, you know, like so. There's a way that they're also surrounded by other queer people, and I think that's also really important because that to me is family. It's the chosen family because I know people will say my name and they'll know how to put the altar down versus those who are my bloodline who can't even see me.
Ooh. Woo. Wow. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a model for how I think a lot of people go through life and they don't realize that they can create their own notion of family that feels
Yeah.
sustainable
Facts.
and restorative to them.
Yes.
And that is such an important invitation as we deal with all these broader collective changes. Those roots, right? Like you said, the ancestry,
Yes.
the genealogy, the family as the root, not the family that's with you and the family that came before you is so critical for grounding you amidst these
Yes.
changes so that you can navigate them effectively.
Yes.
So, I'm curious, how are you navigating this next month, or how would you recommend folks set intentions, navigate this next lunar cycle? Do you, are there rituals or
Mm.
practices you think people can work with over the next month?
Yes, I do. So something I've noticed a lot when I'm working with folks individually and also like in a group setting is that people don't know how to self-reflect.
Mm.
It's not taught. So I recommend this lunar cycle is a self-reflection one. And I want folks to put the term manifestation down,
Yeah.
put manifestation down, okay? And
Pack it up.
pick it up and pick up activation, right?
Hmm.
Pick up activating, pick up figuring out what it means to actually turn something on so that you can work with it versus thinking you can just figure out there somebody else is going to give it to you. So how do you do that? Self-reflection. So for this new moon cycle, because Mercury is also retrograde, I recommend this to folks. I let my people on my Patreon as well do this. So I recommend creating a genealogy. Well, who is the family that you want to construct? And how do you answer that question? Who's going to say your name when you're dead? So that's the prompt. So sit down with some water, right? Because we're going to have the elements there. Your body is earth. So we're going to put some water down. We're going to put a fire, so light or incense, so that you can represent. It's a representation. This is what we call the law of correspondence, right? So you corresponding elements so that you can represent it. And then I want you to write down who will say your name when you're dead. Write
Mm.
it. Just keep writing until you can't write anymore. And as you are writing, I want you to notice what the first emotion that is coming up. What is the emotion that you are feeling? Not what you're thinking, not what you're feeling. It should be one or two words. Write that down and keep writing. Where in the body do you feel that feeling? Write that down. Keep writing. What does it feel like? Write that down. Keep writing. When you're finished writing, then what is the song that comes to you? What is the song that represents the emotion? And what is the song that represents the story? That's the beginning of a playlist. Finish the playlist at least 10 songs down. I prefer an hour, but I say 10 songs. Why? Because it's memory, it's flow. Music allows memory to come through. So this is about memory making and remembering something else. So I would say reflect upon who you want to call you, who you want to call your name when you're dead, because what that's going to do is help you go through the genealogy of where you come from, who you do and don't know. And this is where the emotions can come to the surface so you can actually have a conversation with yourself. This is sun and moon. This is your body and your light. They need to come together to have a conversation so you can actually self reflect and see yourself. Mercury retrograde. So that's what I would say.
Wow. Wow.
That's
That's
rich.
profound.
Yeah.
That's rich. I'm so excited to make my playlist. And to really, I mean, I think too, this question of who is going to say your name when you're dead is making me think so much about this Aaliyah tribute that just transpired at Essence
Mm-hmm.
Festival, produced by Missy Elliott, longtime friend and collaborator. I did not attend Essence Fest, but I was able to watch the tribute on YouTube and just was following the discourse online. And a question that kept coming up for me, obviously there's so many thoughts around the use of AI and the visuals, like as the performers were doing their thing, there were these like massive, clearly, there these images of a woman that clearly was like not Aaliyah. um and it really made me think like who is responsible for protecting the
Ah,
legacy of our icons and of our cultural stewards after they are gone, after they are no longer
ah,
here to defend their name? Like, whose responsibility is it to do that? And what happens when us, as people, fans, folks who love Aaliyah and love these like people who have impacted our lives, what happens when our views are different from the people who have been entrusted with her legacy and who are actively producing the tributes and who are very open about embracing AI? Like,
yep,
what are the spiritual ramifications of placing our ancestors in artificial systems?
yes, yes.
And yeah, I've just been sitting a lot. I've been sitting with that.
But those are great questions. And I want people to reflect upon that because once you can get to the self reflection, then that's the responsibility piece. The accountability we talked about earlier comes when you can be accountable to you and the responsibility you have to being human,
Yeah.
right? And that responsibility starts with how you maintain this body. It is the first altar and vessel that spirit can come down through, right? So I think it's a beautiful question because this is the Pluto and Aquarius thing, right? The people, opposition of Jupiter going into Leo, that is going to break some things because the public has to take some responsibility for who's been put into power. It is not saying that it is just one or the other, but we do have power. And I always say power to the people, but do the people know their power,
Right.
right?
Right.
We don't until we break the hold that the patriarch has on our understanding of how we see ourselves and one another, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's what Aaliyah is. A patriarch is controlling her image. It's patriarchs who are commodifying her body still. Why? Because you can feed off of a Black woman's body because that is the location of the birthing and the economics of a racial capitalist system. You know what I mean? So I do believe it's a spiritual thing. This has always been a spiritual warfare. So the new moon in Cancer is also going to show us just how much spirit has been here. And if we don't take responsibility for our own heads and spirit, then again, it's going to be used somewhere else. And that's going to be that Jupiter and Pluto opposition.
Yeah, and that Pluto in Aquarius too is like that plutocracy, that like
Yes.
power in tech and media that is kind of underground, kind of secretly controlling everything. And so
Yes.
many of these famous artists, they might will their estate to their family, but then their family's like, well, I need money, so I'm just going to give those
Right.
rights to a corporation.
Yep.
And then now your memory's preserved by a little soulless
Yes.
institution, right? That Pluto and Aquarius versus someone who actually is going to remember you and your true light and what you would have really wanted. And so for me, it really also, who is definitely going to speak your name when you're dead is going to be some tech platform like Instagram or Threads or
No, for
ChatGPT
real. For
because
real.
Oh
because
man.
For
all of us
real.
are posting all of our images and our thoughts and our feelings to all these platforms and encoding it and archiving it in systems we don't control. And so
Yep.
that brings me back to my gospel about joining community run platforms like
Yes.
Invite and
Hmm.
other platforms that where your data, your memory is actually stewarded by people who are from your community, people who might have known you and been like, no,
Mhm.
they wouldn't have wanted that, right?
Yes.
Um, I think that's going to be a much deeper reckoning. I mean, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. And I think as people pass in this AI age, people are going to start to see, like, oh, wait, like my memory is preserved in Claude, which is also like has contracts with the
Yeah.
US military government, right? Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's not in any way Cancerian. That's not maternal. It's not caring. It's not embodied. It's not spiritual. It's not nurturing. It's not protective.
I
Um,
agree. I
and it's a month to grapple with that because this stuff is really popping off.
And the last thing I want to say, 'cause I completely agree with that. And so part of me also says with the Pluto and Aquarius, we're going to figure out different technologies and the technology of the land again. And there's a
Yes.
way that when I say with Neptune and Saturn and Aries, it's also identity breaking and the ways that we have been shielded our bodies with these identities that don't make any sense because it's confined us more. We have these conversations online, right, about what is Black now. And again, it's the same conversation. We've had the same conversation since Zora's time, since Ida's time, right? But it's come back up again in this very bioessentialist way. While people think they're doubling down in these very, it's for my culture, but actually you digested your oppressor so much, you do his job better for him because we know he's mediocre. So you will be the better one who who brings these kind of technologies in. So what I'm arguing now is because of the way Chiron and Taurus is going to be, and we're going to have to understand that these bodies do need basic things that come from the land with the food, that come from the air, what we breathe, from the water, which we drink, that there's going to be a shift, especially politically, for regional-based, land-based identification, because those are going to be the people that you are going to have to be able to truly know and engage with and understand, not in friendship, but in actual community, because we have to care for one another, because otherwise we know the state, whatever that state is, will literally suck us dry. So we see this now in New York with the DNC, with like the Democratic Socialists. That's really because it's New York. It's a geographical land-based location of identification. I think we're going to see something interesting in Texas that's going to be about land, though, because it's beef. You got the screw worm there. This is all Chiron and Taurus. When you have structures break down, you have new diseases come into town, right? We've already been here before, and I think people, whether you have this ideology or not, they're tired of being sick.
Yeah.
Right. They're tired of being sick. They're tired of not being able to either have their heat in when the goddamn power grids go down because your supposed leader is now taking his ass somewhere else, or they're tired of burning up. So I do think that because of the heat, the global, this is fire and air, with heat rising, with everything shifting, we're going to have a new technology and understanding of growth cycles, of what is being planted, because even the land itself is having to readjust. This is the basket as well. This is the change, right? So when we talk about the rise of the human, that's what I mean. We're gonna have a new articulation with our land, because we have to understand the land is now an active actor. It's demanding a seat at the table, and so is the water. So I think that's what we're having. This is Cancer. So Cancer, the waters are saying, baby, I am here. You will listen to me. So what does it look like to have the water and the land be at the seat of decision making?
Yeah, it's a month to water yourself for sure.
Yeah.
And I think your ritual is just the perfect way for people to ground that spiritually. Get a glass of water in front of yourself and think about how you want to feel and how
Yes.
the world you want to create. Um, Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. I think we could talk for another hour. You are just
No, this is
such
great.
a font of wisdom and joy and perspective. And I'm really honored that you were here today.
No, this is fun. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm going to be sitting with this for the rest of the month. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then we'll be back next month to reflect on how all of our intents and settings went.
Yes.
Yes. And how all of this played out in the culture. I'm very excited excited and nervous to see, what we're going to be talking about a month from now.
Stay tuned.